go, wait, wow, this is not working out the way I thought it would in my head. I have to pick a different spot.
Mm.
And sometimes I pick a different spot because the light isn't right. And that's another thing. I literally, as I go around and I kind of keep spots in mind, I will take a picture of them, especially around the time of day that I think I would come back, so that I actually know what angle the light's going to come at. On a day like this one, for example, it's very diffuse lighting, so that kind of makes it a bit easier. But I still find with diffuse lighting that if the sun is still facing me, I'm still going to get bad results. So even with diffuse lighting, I kind of need it behind me, and it limits my options.
I think
Part
most
of it,
people don't realize how fast the earth is moving in relation to the sun. You really notice it, or I notice it when I'm photographing flowers. You often have way less time than you think you have. And it would help if everything just stood still, but it doesn't work that way.
oh yeah, it's the bane of my existence.
Yeah.
I at least a few times I've been staging a project and I see the shadow creeping towards me and I go, oh shoot, okay, you maybe have half an hour, Beth. You better get a move on because the light's going to change, and when you come back and take more pictures, it's going to be different. So so usually I'll point this out. I don't really like to have certain details in the background for the most part. I'm pretty fussy. There's certain things I really don't like to have. I don't really like power poles. I don't really like vehicles for the most part. I like sheds as long as they're not too messy. I don't like RVs. So that's another way in which I'm kind of fussy about my background because I really don't like a lot of clutter. I think it takes away from my composition. But sometimes I'm okay with it if it's enough in the distance. And with this one, I tried to crop it so that you didn't see that little sliver of the city there. And it looked weird. So I put it back in and I liked it, especially since I really like that wrought iron detail. So, and I even like the little graffiti that somebody's put on here with chalk in the background, which was another reason I picked this spot.
Oh, that's fun.
So Kathy, the other day I took a photograph of you, you remember, down at Pioneer Park, and I only photographed sort of from the chest down, and you were at the left-hand part, and then there were Juno's dog tracks on the right. This was the picture that inspired me to take a different view.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Well, there's some context for this one. My mother is also an amateur photographer. And when I was in my, I want to say late teens, early 20s, she joined Flickr. And she joined a group called Bench Monday. It's not a very active group these days, unfortunately. And I seem to be one of the few people left to post in the original spirit of it. But back in those days, it was a very flourishing group. And she would recruit my sister and I to stand on things because my sister and I have a nice wardrobe and funky shoes, and she would sometimes give us props like stuffed animals or funky socks or something. And as typical for that age, we were kind of like, oh, Mom, that's so lame. Why would you make us do that? And she'd roll her eyes at her and she'd roll her eyes back at us, but we'd do it. And after I'd done that long enough, I went, wait a second, this is actually kind of a neat idea. So when I had my first Flickr account, I posted some of my own Bench Mondays, and then I lost interest in Flickr and I rejoined it when the pandemic started and went, right, I should start taking Bench Mondays again. They would be really great for showcasing all these skirts that I make and dresses. And I have even more funky shoes. I should show them off. So just before the pandemic started, I started making this skirt. I do something called English paper piecing. I love hand piecing. It's probably my biggest quilty passion. And I did most of this in the early lockdown days of the pandemic when we were all kind of panicked about what exactly was going on and what was this. And finished this, oh, I don't know. It probably took me 3 or 4 months to really finish it. And then that first summer of the pandemic, I grabbed this little bench that I own and I carried it in a bag. Oh my goodness, it was heavy. wandered around the dusty alleys of Kamloops until I found a background that I was kind of okay with and took these pictures. And and then posted it on Bench Monday. And this was my first Bench Monday of my new account.
And the dandelion just makes it.
I think so.
Yeah.
And it was a really bright sunny day. And oh my goodness, I was pretty self-conscious because I was around some houses. And I was kind of expecting that somebody was sitting in their kitchen, drinking their coffee, looking out at me going, what the heck is she up to? Because I've got my tripod set up and I put it on a timer and I kind of hope for the best. And which is why on a lot of these pictures, the focus isn't quite what I want it to be. It would be a little better if somebody was with me kind of pressing the shutter instead. But I can't really expect that of somebody. So I do it myself and it's imperfect, but it's done. And I look like a total weirdo because I go over, set it up, and I set the timer, and then I hop onto this thing, and I just about fell off a couple of times because I'm trying to do it kind of quickly.
Now that one heel looks pretty precarious.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's move on, shall we?
Yep. So here's another Bench Monday. The idea behind the Bench Monday is you don't necessarily have to stand on a bench. The idea is that you're standing on some sort of raised surface. So I'll often use things like stairs. And I try to find backgrounds that are interesting, but not necessarily too fussy. So that whatever I'm showcasing, because really it's about the project, not as much the Bench Monday. The Bench Monday's the excuse. And I thought I was going to use the playground of a school downtown and got there and went, oh, the light is all wrong for this. Oh, look, there's some stairs over there. Oh, that's way better. And took a bunch of pictures. And this is the one I liked the best.
That's fun. Our daughter made a tie skirt like that when she was in high school. Do you remember that, Ken?
I do. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I took a couple of attempts. I didn't get it on the first attempt. I took the linings out and the skirt was rubbish. So I threw it in a bag and I just recently started making stuff out of it. And this was the second attempt.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So I've had it for years, but I hadn't really taken good pictures of it. So I feel like taking these pictures has also been, wait a second, you have these old projects. And the thing about projects is they're very ephemeral. And all it takes is spilling your pasta sauce and coffee down the front of yourself to totally ruin it and make it into something that's really not salvageable anymore. So I feel like my photography is kind of a race against time before I have a chance to ruin anything. So I kind of have a format for how I try to take my project pictures. I try to take an overall picture. So I have most or all of the picture of the project into it. And then I try to take a couple of closer ups. It depends on how much I love the project, how invested I am in it. If it's a donation quilt, I don't get too fussy about tons of close-ups, but if it's something for me, something I fussed over a lot more, I take a lot more pictures or try to. And this one was for me and I was very proud of it. And again, I picked a spot to take a picture I didn't expect I was going to. I thought I was going to clip it to a staircase and got to this patch of a garden at MacArthur Island and went, wait a second, that green really matches the chartreuse of my project. I think they'll go really well together. And I think the bricks or the cement that's been made to look like bricks will be a really nice neutral background. And it turns out I was not too off base.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Well, thank you.
Oh, that's sweet.
This one, again, didn't pick this background. Didn't think I was going to photograph it this day. Was photographing something else, but I took this with me just in case. Saw this fence and went, oh my goodness, the colors match perfectly. Here's another example of, okay, which lines do I pick? The lines that I picked were the fence, whereas you can see on this very old rugged shed behind my quilt that the line is kind of slumped a bit because they're not straight. And when I realize that lines aren't straight, I give myself permission to ignore them and just pick the ones that are. So another interesting thing too about quilting that's difficult to photograph is the light on the quilt. So when I tried to photograph this quilt in full sunlight, it's too textured. It
Would have
was
got a lot of shadows. They would have created lines, which would have distracted, I think.
yes, and the thing too with a quilt is it's very hard to store it flat. What we tend to do is we tend to fold them up and put them on a shelf. So if I know I'm going to take a quilt out, I try to give myself a couple days heads up so that I can lay it flat somewhere so I can try to get the wrinkles out a bit. And sometimes I'll iron it if I feel it's appropriate. But with this one had been stored for ages. So even though I laid it flat, I think I ironed it. Those creases, they're there. I don't think I can get rid of them. And I found in the sunlight, you could see exactly how I folded it. Whereas with this way, you can see it, but it's not too distracting.
Oh no, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and it showcased the quilting without making it too shadowy, which was really nice. Yeah, again, like this one, I really fussed over this one. It's not as crisp as I'd like it, but because I take it myself and I can't really expect anyone else to trail behind me and spend a couple of hours holding a quilt for me.
And those are Beth's fingers. Yeah.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
that's me. I took my tripod, took the quilt out to MacArthur Island, and this is the arena behind me. The only thing I wasn't quite happy with is I didn't manage to center it perfectly on the sidewalk lines, but this was one of the few pictures where I managed to take it where I had it basically square. I had a lot of pictures where it was just, it was too low on one side or too high on the other. And so I would take a batch of 5 and then I'd go look at them and go, oh, I keep draping it on that one side again, gosh darn it. And then I would take another batch of 5, and this is one of the few where I got it right.
That's cute. Yeah.
And there's other details in here I really love. I really love the kind of cracks in the wall that you can see above me. Rather than finding it a distracting detail, I really like it. I love the signs of wear. When possible, and depending on the project, it doesn't always lend itself very well to it, I try to find natural props where I can. I knew when I finished this one that I wanted to use leaves to frame it. And I waited until it was leafy season. And I think I managed to photograph this just before we got that cold snap where we got dumped with snow and then it was winter and I knew the leaves were gone for now. And because I'm a perfectionist and I anxiousize and I go, oh, was this really good enough? Oh, it's not crisp enough and such. I knew I had a limited time and I was like, right, I got to get this right today. I don't know how much longer I have. Beth, you're going to have to be happy with what you get. So I wasn't quite happy with how I laid the leaves out and I had a few gaps that weren't right to me. But it was a really windy day and the leaves kept blowing all over the place. And it's really handy for going, whatever, okay, this is good enough. My hands are freezing and I'm so tired of putting these leaves back in place. So this will have to do. But I liked how I had that one little leaf at the top that looked quite complete. Almost like I did it on purpose, but I swear I didn't.
Oh, it's a super frame. Oh boy.
Yeah, the color choices are perfect. Yeah.
Yep.
So I have a few more little cross stitch projects like this, and I've been thinking of this summer going, oh, what if I could find some like petals that have fallen somewhere and I could frame them with that. So I might try this idea again, but with different materials. This is a bit of an older picture. I think I did this 3 or 4 years ago. As I mentioned, I do English paper piecing. And I love tiny hexagons. Hexagons are my shape I love the most because they go together the easiest and there's less fussing over matching stuff up. And I love really small fiddly stuff. And with this one, I didn't repeat a fabric.
Wow.
Or rather, I did repeat a fabric, but I picked larger scale stuff that I could pick a different patch of the fabric that made it look like a completely different fabric. And I think by my calculation, I had 371 hexagons, something like that, with almost as many fabrics in it.
Is that hand sewn?
Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I'm a member of the Makerspace, and I have access to a laser cutter.
Oh, yeah.
I don't buy my little paper pieces. My clever boyfriend puts them on the program on the computer and goes, does this look right? And he'll cut it out for me, and then I'll go, yeah, that's about right. And then he'll cut it out, or I'll do it myself later on. And because I can make them and I don't have to pay for them, I can make as many as I want. I don't try to save them. I just throw them out when I'm done. But this was I remember I took this very early in the morning. I couldn't sleep that night for whatever reason. So it was just getting light outside, and I went, well, darn it. Obviously, I'm not going to sleep. So why don't I go out and take quilty pictures? So I took my tripod and found an alleyway somewhere near MacArthur Island. And I seem to recall I had to stop at some point because this person had let their dog out. I have a bingo chart I make in my head, and I check the bingo card off whenever certain things happen. And one of them is a dog barks at me, and it happens almost every time I'm out taking quilty pictures. But this one was, the dog was in the yard I was trying to use the fence of. So he had a sniff and barked at me for a while, and I stood there, and then he went back in, and I went back to taking my pictures. Yeah. Oh, and I'll also mention, yes, I intentionally wore a heart top so that it kind of matched my project.
No, that's fun.
Here's another Bench Monday.
The hat is great. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have found sadly that we don't have a lot of awesome benches in Kamloops. I don't know why. I see these fabulous pictures on Bench Monday of these amazing, sometimes very artsy benches that people have in other parts of the world. And for some reason, this particular bench I'm standing on seems to be the most common one in our city. So unfortunately, I can't find awesome benches very often, but what I try to do is I try to find ones with backgrounds that are really nice. So I have this beautiful wall. And if I can have other interesting things around, so in my case, it was the pot of flowers. I picked this bench because I knew my top and my hat would go well with the flowers and make them ping a bit. Yeah, and the problem I found with this particular photograph was I was dealing with lines again. When I was trying to adjust it, I use Keystone, is it Keystone adjustment in Photoshop? That's what I use.
Oh yes, that's right. I know what you mean.
I was using this pillar on the side and going, wait a second, is that actually straight? Am I distorting it? And then I realized, oh no, I don't think that's straight. I think that's actually curved. So the lines that I was trying to use was this line right above me and the line behind me, like a grid. I didn't get it quite perfectly, but I got it good enough. And I'll often use the lens adjustment so that I'm not curved brick.
Pin cushion is another one too. But you're getting a bit obsessive, have to say.
Yes, I quite agree actually. So the project I'm showing off in this one is my skirt. I get most of my fabric from thrift stores for skirts. And so I'm able to go to a thrift store, get a chunk of fabric. And sometimes I pay, I don't know, $5, $2, something like that. And then I go home and I go, right, do I have thread that matches? Half the time I do, for my sewing days back in high school, trying to use up all that thread. And then I make a skirt, and then I put something together and I go, right, I should make a Bench Monday. And that's what I did. And I also got lots of weird looks on this one because I was at Riverside Park using the Coliseum behind me. So I had a few people wandering past who were very bemused about what the heck I was up to. I think they thought I was trying to be an Instagram influencer, which I was not. So yeah.
Joan, I could see you doing Bench Mondays. What do you think?
No.
No.
But I think that maybe you should take some pictures of my quilts.
Yes, well, that could be done. Yeah. You got to find some fences though.
No, you find the fences. I'll just give you the quilts.
Yeah.
I would love to have some of my quilts photographed like that.
Well, I used to photograph Kathy's quilts and I would take them out in the backyard in Colwood. We had wooden fences there. We've never taken them out in the community. We should have at Royal Roads. That would have been fantastic. But, you know, one place we could do some nice quilt stuff possibly, but we'd need to get a bit of equipment, of course, is hospice where we walk the dogs in the morning. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Just let me know. I would love to have my quilts photographed.
Yeah. Well, it's going to cost. Anyway, let's keep going here. This is great.
So the other thing I'll mention about fences too is that the only parts of town that we seem to have fences that are the best, or at least the most accessible, seem to be the North Shore and the downtown, because they have alleys, whereas
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
alleys the
Mhm.
other part, not so much. So as for this one, for example, I did actually take a bench Monday, but I also tried to take a few close-ups. This is in front of the old courthouse that has one of the few really colorful benches I found in town. And I picked it because it was an almost perfect match. You can't quite tell, but
With
for
the
the
flowers, yeah.
dark pink of my flowers there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also try to show off other awesome things I found in thrift stores, because I'm kind of a thrift store addict. Is, you know, my necklace and my bag were both from thrift stores, so I'm like, yes, I should wear these. And I used a genuine 1970s muumuu pattern that was found at a thrift store to make this as well. And so when I post it in Flickr, I make all of those comments. And yeah.
What? Oh, on Flickr, not on Instagram.
No, strictly a Flickr girl. I have almost no followers and don't get a lot of views, but it's kind of my prompt to go, right, Beth, you need to go take some pictures, and at least a few people will see it.
Huh.
So the other difficult thing I have when taking these pictures is I have very long blonde hair, and if it's a breezy day, my hair usually blows in my face or blows in directions I don't really want it to. So I'm constantly trying to move my hair off of my shoulders as I'm photographing. So here's another bench Monday with more thrift store fabric, just like the last one too.
Oh, I love that. That's cute.
I used the rose garden at Riverside Park just as the rose season was ending. So I think within a couple of weeks of taking this picture, the roses were gone.
Mm.
I didn't know I was going to pick this bench, but I walked past it after trying a few other spots and hating what I got. I saw that the blue on this bench here matched my shoes, and the brown also went with my outfit. And I went, perfect. Oh, look, there's roses. And there were people off playing in the tennis courts. And this one gentleman who was kind of circling the part or the rose garden, taking pictures, he kept looking up at me with a little smile on his face because he was very curious about what the heck I was doing. And at some point said to me, hey, do you want some help? And I'm like, oh, no, I'm doing my thing. I do edits, but I try to pick edits that don't make the photo look like I don't know, I did a composition from different photographs. But with this one, I took another one of my photographs from the same series, and I cut a little square of it from the bench, and then I copy and pasted it onto this bench because I wanted to take the placard out behind me. I picked a picture from the many I took where my leg didn't quite cover the corner of it, because when you're trying to edit a detail out and something else is kind of overlapping with it, you can see where you made that edit and it looks bad. At least when I do it, other people are more skilled. So I got one where I wasn't overlapping with the placard on the bench. And then I cut and paste that other picture, covered up the placard, and then blurred the edges so that you wouldn't know I made the edit, because I thought it distracted from the composition. And those are a lot of the things that I do. I also use like the spot healing feature on Photoshop a lot to get rid of like little threads that I forgot to take off, or little bits of dust that I forgot to brush off. So I'm constantly making little tiny edits all the time.
Wow. Oh, pretty.
Here's another donation quilt. The floral fabric was in my mother's stash, and I went, oh, well, not my usual thing, but it would make a really great summer dress, which I still haven't taken good pictures of. So I had scraps and I made a donation quilt. Long time ago. It's also very wrinkly because it's been folded up. So I took it out one day and Didn't know I would take a picture of it, but I found this bench in a soccer field at MacArthur Island and went, oh, wait, the colors are the same. The yellow really matches well and the green kind of echoes well. And even the bench, even though it looks black, was actually a really dark green, but also matched. And I was in the shade, so you can't see my wrinkles quite so much. But you can see the quilting, which is also what I wanted.
It really highlights the quilt.
I thought about editing that line out at the top, but I thought, no, it's kind of a lot of work and whatever. I like it. And it also kind of echoes the quilt. So I liked it.
When you update your Photoshop, which you're not interested in doing right now, it's dead simple now. You just use the lasso tool and you press content aware and it will disappear and no one will know it was ever there. It's incredible. When the time comes.
Yeah, maybe one day. And that's the other thing too, that I know I'm not the only one that struggles with this in the editing stages. At some point you have to let it go and go, right, I'm not quite happy with this and that and the other thing, and oh, I could make that adjustment. But at some point, just like a painter, you have to walk away from the canvas and go, enough's enough.
Yep. Get on with your life. Yep.
Yeah, because I call it going down the rabbit hole, where I hyper focus and I spend a couple hours editing and complaining and saying I didn't quite take it right. And my boyfriend goes, you know, it looks fine. You could just leave it. And when I sense I'm about to start spiraling down my couple of hours of obsession of editing, I call it the rabbit hole winking at me. And I need to not wink back and I need to let it go. So when I got to that line in the soccer field, I went, no, I mean, the rabbit hole is winking at me again. I need to let it go. So this is a very rare instant where I actually used the front of somebody's house. And there were a couple of reasons I did it. And another one of my golden rules is I don't like to really photograph where there's visible windows. I really don't want someone to come over to me and say, what the heck are you doing? Why are you taking pictures into my house? So I think of it as sort of strategic self-defense. I got up to this house and I thought that screen at the front of it was a board. So I thought maybe this house wasn't lived in anymore. And I got closer and went, oh, okay, that's just a sunscreen. Well, they certainly can't accuse me of taking pictures into their windows. So I'll stick with it. This was just as fall was starting. And I really liked that I could still see the flowers and that there were some fruit in the trees there. So another detail that I think that little white splotch on the fence is paint. But another thing I often use the spot heal feature for when I'm editing these photos is I'm often editing out bird poop that's usually streaking down the fence. On my earlier edits that I might go back and redo, I didn't do that. And now I look at the photo and go, oh, I left the bird poo in, crap. So I want to change that. But now it's another thing I immediately try to fix because I think, again, it kind of distracts from the composition. Another thing I'm also looking for when I'm picking a spot, I don't mind dead grass. As you can see, there's a bunch of kind of scraggly dead grass in front of my quilt. But I notice in the summertime that a lot of the fences get a lot of really tall weeds around them. So when I pick a fence and I go, oh, I'm going to come back to it, I also have to keep in mind, right, are there going to be a bunch of weeds in front? So actually before summer starts, when we're just getting into spring, that's actually a really good time because the weeds haven't grown up yet. Or, you know, at the end of the season like this, when people have started trimming things back. Oh, I didn't realize I put this one in. This is an older quilt too. I did this back in my student days in Victoria. And it sat in a bin for the longest time because I thought I was going to do fancy stuff with it and with the border rather, and didn't. And then finally went, oh, okay, done is better than perfect. Let's just quilt this thing and be done. So this was for my sister, and she wasn't going to get this quilt until I had it photographed, which took a couple years. So I photographed it down at the Japanese garden at Riverside Park. And like I said, I take close-ups, and I think the close-ups were what I was happier with than the actual overall entire picture.
Is that all just free motion quilting that you do?
No, this is a pantograph that I followed. That was
Oh,
kind of tiny, and I concentrated very hard.
I don't know what a pantograph is.
So a pantograph is a usually interlocking repeating design that's a continuous line of stitch that you would usually do on a long arm. That
Oh,
you a pass, and then you roll the quilt up, and then you do another pass. And like I said, it should be interlocking so that you hopefully can't see where the rows really stop and start.
okay.
So that's what this is here. Another thing I really don't like to do is I don't like to take quilt pictures where I have, so you can see I've done this very off center. And I find if I do it very on center, instead of skewed like this, I start to go down the rabbit hole of trying to get it lined up squarely. But either I didn't do it squarely when I photographed it, or the quilt itself, being an imperfect object, isn't quite square, and then I would start to twitch when I was editing it. So this is the trick I came up with. If I skew it, I don't feel quite as much of a need to adjust it when I'm editing it. But yeah, I probably picked a little more skewed angle than I should have, but still like it.
Mhm.
This is one of my more recent ones. You might have noticed I'm a little obsessed with English paper piecing and hexagons. Might have mentioned that. This is a bag I made over the winter out of a bunch of scraps and some blue lined fabric that someone handed me. I went, oh, I don't know what to do with it. So finally this winter I went, right, I should make a bag. And I photographed this maybe about a month ago. It was a super windy day, so the bag was blowing all over the place. So I had to put something in it to weight it, which kind of threw the lines off of the bag, unfortunately. But it was that or not have it lay flat enough to photograph it. So this was the compromise.
Yeah, I like that picture.
Yeah, this is the second time I posed it. The first time I picked a staircase at MacArthur Island that had the same kind of colors in it. And I thought, oh, nailed it. Got it on the first attempt. Good, Beth. Got it home and went, oh, this really doesn't pop. Gosh darn it. So I found when I look at the photographs that I'm kind of happiest with, I find that often they have the best contrast. If I have a very overall dark project, I find I really look for light background. And if I have a light project, I look for a dark ground. A background rather. I think the ones that are hardest to pose are the ones that are kind of more medium, but this one reads really well as a darker one. So you can see that this is somebody's shed in behind that's painted about the same color as their fence, and someone's come along and spray painted it. So that's what the dark lines are. So I tried to crop it so you couldn't really see the spray paint, but I didn't mind the bottom of it still being in there because it looked very grunge and urban, which is my particular love.
Okay, we're at 50 minutes now, so I don't know if you want to move through quickly or cut to the chase or whatever, just giving you that heads up.
Okay, yeah, I guess I've been trying to hit some kind of highlights, like
Yeah,
I
you've
said.
been doing very well.
So
This is
I
fabulous.
probably have less to say now. I haven't posted this on Flickr yet. Now, this one I've still, because wasn't happy with the rest of my pictures, so I'm going to restage this. But this was taken at Riverside Park with the heart, which is why I picked this. And it had a lot of the same colors, and I liked how on some of the locks, when you look really carefully, you can see other hearts, which I thought also echoed the theme really well. This is one of my few bench Mondays I'm actually super happy with. Again, this is a skirt with fabric I either found at a thrift store or somebody handed me, and I'm showing off my shoe collection. This is the only one I've managed to work a mural into. This is at McDonald Park, and right behind where I am, it used to be a swimming pool when I was a kid. And they filled it in and they've made it a lawn that's a dog park. And somewhere in the last couple of years, they've painted, somebody's painted these murals.
No, we've been there, Ken.
We have indeed.
Yeah, it's really good work.
Are those your John Fluvog shoes, Beth?
Oh, yes, they are. Well spotted. Yeah.
Is that what Bonnie Henry wears?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, she has a pair that they designed and named after her. So this is the particular style of them I like, called the Mary Jane. So I've got about 6 pairs of them in that style that I haven't totally photographed yet. I'm going to use the building for other backgrounds at some point, but this is the only one I've done. And there were people who were in the dog park who again were kind of looking at me like, what the heck is she up to?
Yeah.
And I just kind of smile blandly and nod at them, and then I keep doing what I'm doing. Very few people have had the courage yet to ask me what I'm doing, so
It's a lot easier just to phone bylaw, you know.
Yeah, there's that. Yeah. Another Bench Monday. Didn't make this skirt, but a friend of mine bought it at a thrift store and decorated it and used it in a photo shoot. And then when he was moving out of country and getting rid of stuff, he's like, hey, you'll like this. Here, take this. And I was like, ooh, a skirt. So it sits in my wardrobe, and I occasionally pull this jacket out and wear them together. And I went, oh, they go really well with some fall leaves. And this is at MacArthur Island. And this was also something I had to get onto really quickly, because I knew winter was coming, and I knew that once the leaves had been snowed on, that even if we got a thaw and I could see the leaves again, they would look really kind of trampled and mushy. I wanted them when they were still fairly fresh.
I love the contrast. Oh, those are great.
So this is another one where I'm not really happy with the picture of all the quilts together on the fence, but I liked my close-ups where I was practicing my free motion. So I was on some of them, I was treating every row or two or three as a border, and I was practicing a different design on it to kind of practice how well I could do within the lines. I did this just before spring was getting started, so the grass was kind of dead, but I thought it worked well with the colors I was using and really put the emphasis on the quilts. This is at the ramp that leads into the maker space, the wheelchair accessible ramp. So my boyfriend was in the fab room using the laser cutter, and I was like, oh, right, I have this quilt with me. Oh, okay, I should really take some pictures of it. And the light was changing, as we talked about earlier. So I had a shadow that was just creeping into where I was, and I didn't really want that strip behind me where the paint had kind of chipped off as much. But that's what I had to work with, because that's the only part that wasn't shadowy. And that's what I got. And like I said, I find I'm not really taking it full on. I'm actually kind of taking it where I've skewed it, because then I'm less worried about correcting the lines afterwards.
I love that.
Thank you. I call this one the furry or fuzzy photo bomber. I didn't end up using the fence picture I took of the quilt that day because it was super windy, and I went, oh, I can take some close-ups. Okay, let's do that. Put it on the ground, and this quilt, this little cat came out, and rather than run away as they tend to do, it was like, oh, you're here to pay attention to me. Awesome. Rolled all over my quilt, got it all dirty. I had to wash it afterwards, but gosh darn, it was cute. So this is where I'm getting into some photos I didn't share last time. This is another of my fashion photos where I took a Bench Monday and then took some close-ups. This is a skirt I made from thrift store fabric, and I'm at, oh, what's the park? Peterson Creek. There we go.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I hiked down in the park, and then I found the part where they had the retaining wall under the bridge, and that's what I'm using as my backdrop.
That's great.
And I love the rust. The lines weren't quite straight. Love it.
Yeah, the rust goes with your hair.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. This is another recent one. I bought some vintage magazines at a thrift store over the winter. They're in German. I don't speak German. They're also for knitting. I don't knit, but I love them because I love vintage fashion. And I'm part of a couple of groups on Flickr where you photograph things you found in thrift stores. And since it's in the category of fashion, I went, great, I'll take pictures. But I try to stage it in a way where, again, I don't just get a photograph that documents, I get a photograph that is in and of itself interesting. This is another older picture. You can tell I was using evening light because the light is just setting on the tree over there. This was actually somebody's clippings pile beside the fence, but I thought it looked kind of cool. And I also really needed this kind of light because when I tried to take it in direct light, I got way too much shadow and you could see the wrinkles.
Very gentle.
And this was another one where I went, oh crap, took it in full sunlight, way too much shade. So even though, like, you could say the band of light at the top kind of distracts, I actually quite like it. And this one was also one where I kind of I had a very specific amount of time, so I couldn't anxious and fuss for too long because I wanted the lilacs in there, and the lilacs are here for such a short amount of time. And I knew I wanted them in my picture because that's what's in the fabric. More pictures of interesting things I found that I wanted to document, where I try to make an interesting composition with some vintage buttons. Here's a close-up of a skirt.
Fun.
And I like treating fabric as an art object because I think it is. I like the fact that on this, because it's an older skirt I made, I think back in high school or maybe just starting university, you can see the wear marks. You can see how the dark blue is starting to wear, but it looks better in other patches. And to me, it tells a story of an object that has a life. I'm happy and unhappy with this one. I think the brown is a little too blendy, but when I tried to take it on another fence, I realized that my quilt wasn't hanging flat. And I went, oh crap, that looks horrible. So I found a fence where there was the stuff at the bottom, and therefore my quilt kind of draped. And the lines of the fence are so higgledy-piggledy and wonky, and that I knew that you wouldn't see the imperfect lines in my own quilt. And I thought it made the blue pop really well.
It does, yeah.
And you can see again where I have somebody's house in behind me, but I like those kind of details. I like having a sense of the urban landscape, but I like it to not be too distracting. More fashion. This also took a bench Monday, but then I took some close-ups, and this was my close-up. This is on the grounds. It's a Halley secondary during last summer. And I had to be careful with the lines in this one too, because you have the lines of the wall, and the doors kind of had to look more or less square. And I also was like, oh yeah, the colors are actually going together fairly well.
Yeah, that's true.
This is one of the rare ones I let go of my first photography attempt and went, yep, good enough, because this quilt was so darn heavy that I vowed I wouldn't carry it out in public again. This is on a parking lot on one of the buildings that's beside McDonald Park. I picked a spot where there wasn't a vehicle and put it down on the fence and went, all right, good enough. And also had to edit my perspective and such really carefully, so you couldn't see the lines on the sidewalk. This one was from the last week or two, actually. I carry these sorts of things in a folder with me, and when I find a really good spot, I whip them out and take pictures. And I really liked this grate.
Yeah, it's a great backdrop.
I really like that.
So this is kind of what I do with some of my close-ups. I try to, if I think the backing of the quilt is kind of interesting, I'll do this. I'll lay the quilt flat, and then I'll fold a corner up. I don't do this with all projects because sometimes the backing isn't that interesting, or it's the same fabric or whatever. But if I think it's worth documenting, this is often what I do. So I liked this one because I had strips on the back, and I thought, yeah, I should photograph that. And, you know, same idea, where I made this quilt because of the backing. So I went, yep, I have to photograph the backing. And this seems like a really good way to do it.
Yeah, without making it two pictures.
So this is an alleyway downtown. I really like the details of this repair work that they've done behind them. And I like the weeds in the front, and this is a fence where you can see the wheels because it's a rolling fence, but I happened to luck upon it when they had it open. Otherwise, I don't think I could have used it. And I liked how it really made the light of my quilt pop fairly well. So I showed this one in black and white with just my skirt in color before, but this is how I posted it. So you can see there wasn't really a lot of color to remove other than just the skirt.
Yeah, that's great. Love that.
Mhm. So yeah, again, thrift store fabric, thrift store top. This was a couple summers ago. They've since moved, but we knew a couple who had a farm just outside of town. So we went for a day visit, and I took a couple of quilts with me, and this is the one of their, I took up their front gate. So I've been buying thrift store shirts, clipping the buttons off to use the fabric of the shirt, and this is my button pile. This one I've also showed in the past. This is a quilt for a friend. I don't really like how the green, I don't like the greens together because they don't quite go for me, but I didn't have much of a choice because I really wanted the stones in there.
Mm-hmm. That's at Riverside, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Great quilt.
Oh, thank you. I actually changed the color on this fence because it was way too blendy, but I liked the background with the trees. So I went in and I made a layer with just the fence, and I made it a little bluer so it popped better. Oh, I think that might actually be it.